Okay. Welcome to the Dynasty 365 podcast, the Dynasty Football podcast for fantasyandframes.com and the expanding Fantasy and Frames podcast network. I'm Brian Ford. I'm joined by a few people tonight. First, my co-host, Tyler Howell. How you doing?
I'm doing great, man. I'm ready to get some of these running backs and quarterbacks down. I'm also ready to really buckle down for the draft. I've had family and friends in town, or I've been traveling for the past 3 weekends, and I'm ready to be home and chill and watch some of these guys and figure out who's going to go where and who's going to be the best.
All right. Right on. So today we have a couple folks with us. We have El Jefe, Jorge Edwards. How you doing?
It is rare that I'm on Dynasty 365, so I'm always happy to be here whenever you guys pull me in. So thanks for having me.
All right. And another fellow Fantasy and Frames team member, Joe Matz. Joe, how you doing?
I'm glad to be back. And like Tyler, I'm excited to just buckle down after finishing my move a week and a half ago. So now I can actually just focus on the draft, and I don't have college basketball distracting me anymore. So
yeah. Right on. Yeah, we are hitting the stretch. And so during this stretch, tonight we're going to be doing quarterbacks and running backs. Next week, we're going to be doing wide receivers and tight ends. Joe should be with us, and hopefully Keith can return. And then they'll be back one more time for our sort of rankings episode where we're going to play I don't know about a game, but we're going to talk about challenge each other as being too high or too low on certain folks. And I think that'll be a lot of fun. And then the week after that is a draft preview show that Tyler and I are going to do. And then 2 days later, the Fantasy and Frames family will be live streaming the first round of the NFL draft. So lots of stuff coming.
Nothing better, man. It really is Christmas Day for me. I'm pumped.
Yeah, last year was crazy. We had everybody on. Shout out to Teddy Ricketson, formerly of us, now with TK Nation. He had his finger on the trigger when it came to putting out tweets announcing new draft picks. So he's going to be a hard person to follow up on.
And Nate came with his notebooks of the both sides of the ball roster depth charts for all 32 teams. It was impressive. Yeah.
Funny story about Nate and his notebooks. When I met him at the Fantasy Football Expo last year, he told me he printed out all of his projections for the year on this massive 11 by 17 book. I'm like, dude, why don't you just use Excel? He's like, oh, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah.
What? Putting an entire book of massive paper, and I need to help this guy here.
He's old school. What can I say? He likes it that way.
Yeah. So on our first rookie episode, we kind of talked about in general, the 2022 class being somewhat of a down year relative to 21 before it, and we hope 23 after it. And I think the feeling among a lot of us too is that that's especially true for the quarterbacks. Anybody want to chime in on that or refute me and say that I'm wrong?
Yeah, I'll jump in and say, just as talent evaluators, as a consumer of NFL draft content, there are a lot of very respected people that said the highest graded quarterback in this class would be Davis Mills.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think that they're wrong. I don't know if Davis Mills is all that, but he would be probably at least top 2 or 3 in this draft. And I'm not overly excited about a lot of these guys, but some could certainly have some big fantasy impact if they land in the right spot.
For sure.
It's not great when you turn on the TV and every time they talk about the NFL draft, they obviously start with the quarterback position, the quote unquote most important position on the field. And they start with saying, not the greatest class. It's like, okay, well, it can only go up from there, right? So
it's not good when you start hearing Geno Smith mentioned that whole draft class. EJ Manuel. Anytime that's getting name checked, it's a bad sign.
I feel like comparing these guys to EJ Manuel is just mean.
It's the one way they can look good.
God, hopefully not.
So we're gonna pop around and do the top 4 or 5 quarterbacks here, just a couple seconds on each, some quick hits, and then we'll maybe go around the frames and see if anybody has anything to chime in on. Joe, you're up first with Matt Corral.
So Matt Corral, Ole Miss QB. I think the most exciting things about him, unlike some of these other guys, he has back-to-back years graded out really well. Whether you go PFF, QBR, he's up in the top 10 of overall grade. PFF had him 5th in turnover-worthy play rate, so he was not making mistakes this year, which is an improvement over his earlier seasons. And ESPN charted him as the most accurate of all the top QBs within 20 yards in this class. So I think, if you're looking for just quick hitters, he's your guy. The problems, it's tough to scout exactly what he'll look like in a pro system. Ole Miss ran a crazy amount of RPO. I heard Robert Mays say on a recent podcast that they ran play action over 60% of their plays, and just a disaster under pressure. 6.2 QBR. The FBS average is 11.2. And then a PFF grade under pressure of 37, which is the worst of the top 5-6 QBs in this class. So he's, like all these guys, there's, the strengths if you want to focus on that. But I think, if you're looking at a guy who's a disaster under pressure, that's a pretty big red flag for me.
Okay. I'm seeing him mocked in the late first. Does that make sense to you?
I mean, in this class, I can see it. We'll get into this eventually, I guess, when we do our rankings and arguments. There's 3 guys I can see in the first round, and he's not one of them for me. There's no way I would draft him before the second round.
Okay. All right.
It was crazy about Matt Corral. You talked about it a little bit, his turnover-worthy plays. And deep passes, he's 6th in terms of 6th best and having that low percentage there. You go to the intermediate passes, again, he's 5th.
Yeah.
Definitely underrated this whole, especially with this being a passing league and you have all these, big name wide receivers. It feels like every team is now loading up on big name wide receivers that can stretch the field. It's, for these quarterback needy teams, he's certainly somebody that people should be paying attention to.
Mm-hmm. So speaking of quarterbacks who might be ready to, slide in and start, and do well for a quarterback needy team, I'm going to go with Kenny Pickett. So Kenny Pickett's interesting, small hands mafia aside, he to me is like the most NFL ready of these guys. He's not terribly mobile compared to a lot of the other top 5 or 6 guys, but I think he gets a little too much ding on that. I don't think he's as bad as some people think. But, when it comes to passes, he's accurate to all parts of the field. He's a guy that I'm confident taking as a safe play, as a floor play. Mm-hmm. He doesn't have the ceiling of a Willis, but, when I'm on the clock, depending on do I have the opportunity to wait on Willis to develop, then maybe I'll pick Willis. But would anybody here pick Pickett ahead of Willis in a super flex rookie draft?
Ooh. It remains to be seen the landing spot.
Yeah.
I feel like I could draw a hard line of saying if Willis is picked in the first round, which he probably will be, I will not be taking Kenny Pickett over him. Okay. If he falls to the second or something crazy like that happens, then we can reassess there. But I want that ceiling of Willis, who's just a fantastic athlete.
Mm-hmm. I will say for Pickett, the number one job of any QB is completing passes, and I think he's the best guy, just putting it on the guy, on his wide receiver out of this draft class, which, again, not the greatest draft class. Mac Jones would be number 1, I think, pretty easily. But, I think Pickett's in that conversation. But, yeah, to Tyler's point, this is a draft where whatever team decides to invest in that QB, that's the guy you should probably be taking in your draft because they're invested in that guy.
Okay, right on. So I'm gonna move it over to Tyler, who has a bit of a man crush on Desmond Ritter.
All right, so I am really excited about Desmond Ritter. He's, I tweeted something like, I think it was a couple weeks ago, that there's one guy in this class that checks every box, can make all the throws, is tall enough, is whatever you want to consider tall enough. He's 6'3". He can see over the line, which is very important. You're talking to a guy who watched Baker Mayfield play for 4 years.
Mm-hmm.
So that's important. He's super athletic. He doesn't have the greatest side-to-side speed. He doesn't have a lot of wiggle. He's not Lamar Jackson out there. But the dude can run a 4.5. He has a 36-inch vert. He is just a heck of an athlete. And by NFL quarterback standards, he exceeds any mark you want to put out there, really. He played on a big stage. I guess if you want to consider the American Athletic Conference a big stage, but he made it to the playoff. Mm-hmm. And he had success on a big stage at the college football level, and he's got better every single year at Cincinnati. The dude can run. He's going to get – and, again, going back to fantasy football, the running quarterbacks are the cheat code. Mm-hmm. I can see Desmond Ritter, coming up with a ceiling of maybe the 11th to 13th best quarterback in the NFL, which will obviously include his running ability. He's going to be able to drop back in the pocket, and he's done a good job with his pocket mobility of sticking in the pocket a little more rather than bailing like he did in his first few years of college. Mm-hmm. But he still does run because he can. I mean, if you can run a 4.5, why not? I have two big knocks on Desmond Ritter. One, that dude comes out jacked for games. Everyone knocks his accuracy, and they're not necessarily wrong, but a lot of his overthrows are at the beginning of games, and I saw that in the few games I watched. Like the first quarter, he's just airmailing balls, and then he finally settles down. He's hitting dudes over the middle, and he's hitting deep out routes and things like that. And he just does a good job with it once he actually settles down. The other thing is he needs to put some weight on. He needs to, for lack of a better term, I'll use some draft jargon here. He needs to get some sand in his pants. They just need to stick that dude in a squat rack.
That's draft jargon.
Yes.
See Mel Kiper bust that out on draft day.
There is some good draft jargon. There really is. Sand in his pants. The dude can run under a table. Just all kinds of weird things like that. I actually came up with my own draft jargon watching some of these running backs. I'll drop it on you when we get to the running backs.
Right on.
But either way, Ritter just needs to get some bud on him. I won't use a bad word there, Jorge.
Thank you.
He needs to live in a squat rack for a while and put some weight on so he can take some of these hits in the NFL.
Yeah.
It's crazy. I was reading, the show notes before we went on the air. I had no idea how good he was in deep passes. And we talk about for fantasy football, you want the yardage, you want the touchdown upside. Like all over 100 NFL passer rating, like 145.8, 127.6, and 121.4, all over the field in 20 yards or more. This guy, and I'm not talking like, he has a high passer rating, but he's only like thrown the ball there 5 times. Like, no, we're talking like, 16 times out left, 32 times, in between the hashes, and then 15 out right. Like he really sticks it on you on these receivers, and so that's definitely going to help with a la Jameis Winston who throws it deep, except you're not seeing the interceptions.
Interesting, because when I've been looking up things on Ritter, one of the big knocks is that he's inaccurate with the deep ball. So to hear those numbers is kind of surprising. I guess you kind of got to look at both sides. I guess
if we're looking at touchdown interception ratios, at least he's not turning the ball over, I guess, which is probably for fantasy purposes. Obviously, you don't want those -1 points or -2 points, depending on your scoring settings.
Something tells me Ritter. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was going to say, I honestly don't watch that much college football anymore. I mean, I'm an Arizona alum, so it's been just better to avoid college football. But so I watched the playoff game, saw him against Bama. You know, it wasn't that impressive, mostly because his entire team was overwhelmed. And then, yeah, the more I've dug into these QBs, he's kind of the guy who keeps moving up for me. Where I think he's up there. He might be my number one QB. It's close.
Wow. Okay. Okay. So that's definitely going to be a fun conversation on the ranking show. On the ranking show on April 19th. Stay tuned. I'm going to just throw Sam Howell out there, and then we'll all kind of hit on Willis. You know, Howell's a guy who, again, is mobile like a couple other dudes in this class. You know, he can throw on the run. I think his 2021 stuff is not as impressive because he lost a lot of weapons. But then you can say, well, you know, what does a quarterback do when he's down weapons? You know, can he really, you know, carry the team? Like a couple other guys in this class, I think he goes to his legs too quickly, and that's something that he's going to have to learn. And he doesn't get past his first read well from what I can see. So I think, you know, for me, you know, without getting too far into rankings, you know, I don't have Howell in my top 3. And I don't see him in the first round, maybe even to mid-second round in the NFL draft. If he goes early day 2, could he still be a first-round pick in your Superflex rookie draft?
Go ahead.
Yeah. Just as much as I was praising Desmond Ritter for his deep ball and his ability to make plays on the field, passing, not exactly Sam Howell's forte. Definitely a lot more split. Definitely a lot closer in touchdown interception ratios he's had, especially last season. Nah. I think you can do better than Sam Howell in your rookie drafts this year.
The thing that terrifies me about him, and this doesn't hurt you, you know, necessarily straight up in fantasy, but I think it'll hurt him in real life, which will then hurt his fantasy value. Pressure to sack conversion rate, 31.8%. And based on like I always like to look at the QBR stuff too. He's over, was it -20 like EPA multiple times on sacks. So this is a consistent problem. This isn't just all the good players left, the team was worse. This is a real issue for him. I mean, when people bring up Baker Mayfield, it's not just the size thing. It's he'll bail and he'll take sacks thing too. So that's what worries me about him is he going to be a long-term starter? I'm not terribly optimistic.
And just to throw in there, when I was watching last year, when I was watching Michael Carter, Javonte Williams, De'Ami Brown, I had no idea who Sam Howell was because I don't watch college football. I watch a lot of film before the draft to get ready for it, but I don't watch college football. And I'm going through watching these films like, man, I wish this quarterback was better. Man, I wish their quarterback was better. De'Ami Brown would be a killer if he had a better quarterback. Yeah. And then we get like through the draft and I hear people like, oh, top quarterback in next year's draft could be Sam Howell. I'm like, wait, what? What? So, I'm not a big fan of Sam Howell. That's a long way of saying that.
All right, so let's talk about consensus on not just Howell, but Willis, right? So consensus pretty much across the board. He's QB1 in a lot of people's rankings. I, spoiler alert, happen to not be in the consensus. On the pro side, you know, good arm talent plus the athleticism equals cheat code. But it's also important to remember he's not a running quarterback per se, and that he does look to throw first. I think he's kind of getting lumped in with some people who are not necessarily his style, but who, you know, happen to be, you know, let's face it, black mobile quarterbacks, and people tend to lump them in together. But on the other hand, you know, his decision making and mechanics and footwork have been dinged. He's an upside ceiling play. So, I've heard from folks that, you know, you're looking for ceiling. If you're on a presumably bad team drafting at, say 102 or 103 in a rookie draft, you can definitely wait on Willis. But am I wrong in not having him as my QB1?
So and I'll preface this right off the bat. I'm not going to be somebody who's going to tell you based off of film because I'm a numbers person. I just like the analytics nation. So let me preface that beforehand. I see the picture I see through the numbers is a lot of big plays, but I don't know about that consistency that's there in his production from week to week. He's graded really well in deep passes, but with that you get the high turnover worthy pass percentage courtesy for Football Focus. You mentioned he's not really running, more of a look to pass type of quarterback. Again, for him, it's landing spot dependent. Like if people got blown away, like, oh, look at the combine, he made that perfect throw. DP, oh my God, he's amazing. He's impressing all these coaches. Like it's like pump the brakes for a minute here. I think with any one of these quarterbacks, I mentioned earlier it's landing spot dependent, and I think he kind of is that model example of why that's important. The landing spot that is.
Joe, Tyler,
yeah, I don't think you're crazy. Well, like everyone keeps saying about him, he's the home run pick. He's the guy who the dream is he becomes the next Josh Allen. That's what you're hoping for. Mm-hmm. I think the reality is if he plays early on, he's going to look a lot like rookie Josh Allen, where it's going to be a mess. I think he's more accurate, but I don't know from what I've read about their offense. It sounds like the pro game is going to be a big adjustment. So I don't think he's going to be close to good. Whether that if he's good fantasy wise, it's going to be because of the running. I don't think he's going to be good overall as a QB for at least a year, probably two, which is kind of where I see the big divide between Ritter and Pickett versus him, where those guys I think could be solid QBs right away potentially. Mm-hmm. Which in the best case, obviously, like we said, all these guys feel like fringe first rounders to me. But if you're rolling the dice on a QB. Yeah, he's the home run pick, but I don't expect you to really be cashing in on that lottery ticket for a few years.
Okay. All right. So another guy to maybe talk about on the 19th as to where we all have him. The NFL mock draft database consensus mock has him at 20 to the Steelers. Tyler, what do you think about that fit if Malik Willis goes to the Steelers?
Well, as a Browns fan, I would hate it because then you have to chase the dude around the field. But I think Mitchell Trubisky would continue to start, as Joe said. Malik Willis isn't going to come in and start right away. I would be a little concerned because that ceiling is there, but I wouldn't be terrified. And you could get some guys in the secondary, guys in the linebacker core and defense that might be able to shut down his running. We'll see. But I would not be overly concerned as of right now.
Brian, you brought up a few times scenarios in rookie drafts. So, where would you take them in the superflexes as your quarterback too or whatnot? For me, I look at all these quarterbacks, and especially if I have a mid to high first round pick in these rookie drafts, I'm trading. I'll give these picks away for some 2023 picks. I'm not going to invest in one of these quarterbacks to be my guy for fantasy purposes.
Yeah. I'm seeing a lot of people say Willis at 102 and then trade down right after Breese Hall and him. I'm not so sure either way, but speaking of rookie drafts, last year we had quarterbacks like Lawrence, Fields, Lance, go at the front end of the round. We're not going to get that this year. I've seen some folks talk about that these quarterbacks will be maybe late, besides Willis, will be late first and early second. I've seen a couple mocks where they're creeping up into the mid first. I think people get spooked out in Superflex. What say you? Where are we going to find? Jorge kind of started the ball rolling here. Where's a good place to draft these guys or not, and where do they become a value?
Round 3.
You are really down on them. Okay,
I can't honestly get behind this. It's hard for me.
I hear you.
Yeah. Oh man, I'm not entirely sure I will immediately go quarterback after, spoiler alert, Breese Hall, who's very good. Some of these wide receivers are good. I like them. Yeah. I don't know if any of them are special. We don't have a Jamar Chase or something like that in this class, but depending on landing spot and quarterback and opportunity, some of these guys could shoot up the board big time. If you see the Packers trade up for one of these wide receivers, then that's a big time landing spot. That's a team that doesn't spend first round picks on wide receivers. It's a team that obviously has back-to-back MVP Aaron Rodgers at quarterback with God knows who playing wide receiver. I mean, they are talent deficient at that position, and that whoever they draft is going to have maybe 1 million targets. So.
Okay, so we're going to move into the running backs now, and we're going to take a look at we're going to split this into two pieces. We're going to talk about the big three that seem to be for just about everybody, except, spoiler alert, maybe one fantasy and framer who's not here right now, and then sort of some mid-range guys and some deeper cuts that we like. Joe, start us off with Kenneth Walker.
Kenneth Walker, for me, it's simple. This guy's just a beast running the ball. Obviously, the downside to him is the reason Breese Hall is my number one, along with most people. Breese Hall is a way better receiver than Kenneth Walker. But when you dig into the numbers with Kenneth Walker this year, I like to go through every single guy that PFF has in their big board, put all the numbers in a spreadsheet, look at everything. He's top 5 in elusive rating, in yards after contact, in missed tackles per attempt, and in big runs, which is 15 plus yards per attempt. So he's top 5 in all those. He's the only guy who's going to give you that across the board. He forces missed tackles, which is one of the more translatable skills, which people who aren't big on PFF, maybe they don't know that. It's a big one. And yeah, I like that he has the home run. Like, look at speed score, which is just your 40 combined with your weight. He's over 110. That's a big hurdle. If you're over 110, that means you have elite size speed combo. He and Breece Hall both have that. So, you mentioned the QBs. Kenneth Walker's up there after Breece Hall for me. I'd probably take him over every single QB if I'm doing a draft.
Okay. All right. And Tyler, why don't you give us some thoughts on Isaiah Spiller?
All right. So, I entered my initial prospect rankings on Fantasy Pros a couple weeks ago. I kind of went Isaiah Spiller at 3 because it seemed like a lot of people that I like and that I'm listening to and reading have Isaiah Spiller at 3. After watching him play, I don't know how much longer he's going to be at 3 for me. He's a good athlete. He's a good athlete for his size. I just wasn't that impressed. I watched I'm trying to remember which game it was. If you give me 2 seconds. I watched a big game for him, and I can't remember which it was.
He watched Alabama and then like almost like a MAC team or something. I forget.
I watched Alabama, and how did you know that?
I read it. I replied to the tweet.
Okay, all right. So yeah, I watched Alabama, which tough team to play against regardless. And I watched Kent State. And I turned on Kent State because I'm like, okay, I need a little bit of a palate cleanser because A&M just got worked by Alabama. And I looked at the stat sheet. He had 117 yards rushing, I believe, in that game against Kent State. Not a single run where I was like, oh, wow, that was really good. It was just all well-blocked runs where he didn't have to do anything. He didn't make a lot of moves that were very impressive to me. He's an okay pass catcher. Mm-hmm. He just doesn't really impress me overall. I mean, I think he can be good in the NFL simply because of his size and his ability and his athletic ability, but he's never going to be that dude for a team. Okay. He can be like maybe a Ronald Jones. I don't want to say exactly a Ronald Jones because he can catch a little bit better than Ronald Jones, but he can be a number 2. I don't feel very strongly about Spiller right now.
Okay. All right. Interesting. So I'm going to round us out with Breece Hall here. And I encourage you to go over to fantasyandframes.com and read Keith's article about Breese Hall. Breaks things down really well. For me, he's essentially in a tier of his own at RB1. He does pretty much everything well. The usual things you want in a running back, like patience, visions, agility. I don't. His 40 time, I forget what it was, but it wasn't like super, I think, or was it? I forget.
I think it was 4.39.
Yeah. Okay. I'm thinking of somebody else. Okay.
He and Walker both were just
under
4.4.
Yeah, he was a monster.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. So anyway, and he's also got the long speed, which can be important too, for breaking off the big runs. He breaks tackles well. He's a pretty good receiver. He's pretty much but I think it's important too to think about expectations where RB1 one year isn't the lateral move to RB1 the year before or the year after. And I think if he's going to go 101 in Superflex drafts, even in Superflex. But I think people don't expect JT, and am I wrong?
I think you could be. I'm not going to go ahead and say he's going to be JT, but at the same time, JT landed in the perfect situation. He landed in the Colts with a fantastic offensive line. Not the best quarterback situation, but then again, they might not have run the ball the amount that they did if they actually had a good quarterback. But, this is going to be landing spot dependent for Breese Hall. Off the top of my head, I can't think of the perfect one, but if you guys want to talk for a few minutes, I'll tell you the perfect spot. I just want to look at it.
I don't know if he's Jonathan Taylor, because Jonathan Taylor is obviously, he's the best running back in the NFL, give or take Derrick Henry right now. But yeah, I think Hall's up there. Like if Hall was in last year's class, I think he'd have a good argument to be the best running back in that class. And Najee Harris is no bum, and I'm blanking on Travis Etienne. Obviously, we didn't get to see him play. I think he's good too, but I think Hall would have been at home in that conversation with those guys.
Interesting. Okay. All right. So now we're going to do some of we've got the big three out of the way. What are some other names that we've been looking at that we're liking right now at this point in the process? So we're going to do like a mid-range and then some deep cuts, because I like my deep cuts. Joe, you're up first on the mid-range guys with a guy who I see floating around 4 or 5 in a lot of people's rankings.
Yeah, I think that's probably where he lands in my rankings. I see that on the mock draft database. They've got him going 103. I think he's the 8th running back listed. Like you said, I think he's more in that 4 or 5 range to me. And it's legit because I hate the Sun Devils, but Rashad White's good. He's got the size. He's 6 foot. I think he measured in around 215 at the combine. He ran some really good time, 4.48 again at 214. His jumps were fantastic, 38-inch vert, 10.5 broad. So he's an athlete, and I love him because he's up there for best running back receiver in this class. He caught 43 passes last year, 2.24 yards per run. That's the best of any running back in this class. And he hit 1,000 yards exactly running. So this guy, I think he can be a legit 3-down back in the NFL. And you're getting him in the 3rd round, which is probably where NFL teams should actually be taking running backs, but that's another story.
Yeah.
But I think he's legitimately, I think he's in the discussion as soon as you get past Walker. Like Tyler said, I like Spiller fine. I think Rashad White's one of those guys who's in that discussion for the 3rd back in this class.
I traded him in a Devy league, and at that point in the year, the assessment of him was, really good in college, but probably passing back, 3rd down back in the NFL, a better Kenneth Gainwell. And he's just been rising ever since. And I'm like, I'm not looking at that trade anymore, right? All right. Tyler, you have a namesake that you want to talk about.
Yes. So one of my favorite guys in this class, relatively, is Tyler Beatty. I started watching him, I think, over the weekend, and that dude can play. He has all the physical attributes that you want. He's not a very tall guy. He's 5'8", but height doesn't super concern me for an NFL running back. I mean, unless we're talking like 5'6", 5'5", if we're getting like Jarrett Patterson territory here. But 5'8", 197 puts him at a BMI of right at 30. So that's the golden number, right? 30 BMI for running backs. Ran a 4.45 40. Athletic dude, 121 broad, 33.5 vert. So he has all of the athleticism that you could possibly want. And the thing that really did it for me with him was he's a good receiver. Joe, I watched some Rashad White too. He was a very impressive receiver, but I think it was out of necessity. I think he was the second leading receiver.
It was not a good offense. Yeah.
No, it was that was the other offense that I watched that was kind of like reminiscent of Sam Howell, where I watched the quarterback. I'm like, man, this dude sucks. And I looked at it and like, oh, he could be in the discussion for top quarterback in the draft. I'm like, what is happening? Anyway, I digress. So Tyler Beatty, he has all the athleticism you want. He has the size that you want. He can flat out play receiver. He lines up out wide. He motions out. He can beat press coverage. He can just get open. And on top of that, he can run routes out of the backfield. I saw him run it. He ran a lot of flare routes. He ran a lot of wheel routes, just getting open that way. And in addition to that, he can actually run the ball. He can run it between the tackles. He can bang a little bit. He's not a dude that you want to running between the tackles 15 times a game, but he can at the very least be a threat. That for comparison's sake, I always looked at the Patriots, like when they had what was his freaking name? The dude that punched someone at Oregon.
LeGarrette Blount, right?
LeGarrette Blount. Yeah.
When they had Blount and James White, and somehow Blount had like 18 touchdowns that year. But you could just look at the quarterback or at the running back, like, okay, they're passing. Okay, they're running. Just based off who is on the field. Yeah. And Tyler Beatty can do both. He'd be a really good kind of 1B in a backfield who could, I think he could max out at 50, 60, 70 receptions a year. I think his ceiling statistically is maybe Alvin Kamara with a little bit less carries, maybe close to 80 receptions if he gets in an offense again that is going to give him that opportunity. Again, I said ceiling. I saw Jorge.
Yeah, you piqued my interest right there when you said Alvin Kamara. I'm sorry. I'll let you finish, then I'll give my 2 cents on Tyler Beatty.
So I like the way he moves. He can run the ball well. But yeah, I just think he's a running back that can play receiver. And a lot of these guys are running backs that can catch the ball. Tyler Beatty is a receiver, a pass catcher that can also run the ball. So that is my favorite thing about him.
It's not my favorite thing about him, his pass blocking, which apparently, rookie running backs don't really see the field unless they can protect the quarterback. That notwithstanding, which that can get coached up. I'm assuming. You hit the nail right on the head with his receiving work. Just one of the better receiving running backs in this draft class. If he's able to see the field via improving his pass blocking, he could be a dangerous weapon for some team out there.
And I think one thing that you have to say when people are kind of like downplaying Beatty as like, well, undersized, third down backish, he put up these numbers in the SEC, right?
Yeah.
Right. He was like in the leaderboard on the SEC and like every stat, right? So I think you can't, if we're going to say when we're looking at a Christian Watson and say, North Dakota State, got to take that into consideration, maybe lower him in the ranking, then you can't not take into account Beatty's performance in the SEC. Yeah.
Good call.
All right. And up next, I have 2 guys, but in the interest of time, I'm going to choose one. I'm going to choose one who I think I haven't heard a lot of people talk about, but a couple people who do deep dives on rookies that I really trust are high on him. He's projected as a 4th-round pick. So again, we're not talking about something super elite, but somebody who could probably be fantasy useful. And that's Hassan Haskins out of Michigan. Good size, 6'2", 228, good NFL size. Not a burner, but can accelerate. Good receiver, good pass pro, and those check boxes for staying on the field. I think he's being overlooked a little bit because there's nothing sort of super about him. He doesn't do one thing really, really, really well, right? But I can't put him below certain backs that I have like knocks on that I don't see with Haskins. And so he's a guy that I've had an eye on, and I want to look more into him. Right.
No, I like that pick a lot. I think to your point, if he ends up in a good situation, he's a guy who's not going to mess it up. So he'll take advantage of that. Like if he's on a bad team with a bad O-line, he's not going to do much. But you put him in a solid spot, and he'll produce. So I like that pick a lot.
Okay, Joe, let's stick with you. And this is where we should have like a drop for like when on the radio when they're about to play a deep cut, like this is where the drop goes for that.
We have to find that one guy that does that voice for
or we just record Brian because I thought he did it really well. So
yeah, I love my deep cuts. Joe, let's stick with you. Kick us off. Yeah.
For my deep cut, I had trouble coming up with a deep cut because I kind of think there's a drop off after you get past those top 12 or so guys, but. Mm-hmm. I mean, just looking at the size, speed, Zamir White for Georgia, shout out to Keith. This is not the Georgia back he's high on, but I mean, that Georgia team's stacked. I mean, he's 5'11", 214. He ran a 4.40. Mm-hmm. And, on a per play basis, Cook outproduced him. But Zamir White's the guy that they fed the ball the majority of the time the last couple of years. So that Georgia coaching staff, they liked the way he ran the ball. And if you go through the PFF stats, Cook's the better receiver, but you look at the running, there's not really a difference between Zamir and Cook on their grades. So, yeah, I think he's a guy you can get on day 3. And again, he's a 5'10", 215 guy, ran a 4.40 and was productive in the SEC. So I'll happily take a late round shot on him in real draft and fantasy drafts, wherever.
Right on. And I'm pretty sure, friend of the frames, Mike Bauer would not call him a deep cut. He actually has him up at number 4. Interesting.
Wow, there we go.
Okay, yeah, aggressive. Tyler, I want you to be very sincere about this next gentleman.
I can't entirely say it's not because he is a candidate for the all-name team in this draft. But I really like Sincere McCormick out of University of Texas, San Antonio. Obviously not a huge school, but just watching him play, I really liked him. He's a shorter guy, 5'8" and 4'8", so 5'8.5". 205.
You love those short guys.
I guess I do. Got something going here. BMI 30.3, so he's solid there. The one thing that I was actually stunned by was after watching him play, he would have some runs where, he does a good job. He has good vision. He's breaking through these holes really well. He's finding holes that might not necessarily be there, but he's just flat out outrunning dudes when he gets in the open field. And I looked at his 40 time. I was stunned that it was 4.6. So I don't. Maybe he had a really bad 10-yard split. Maybe he's a little bit of a slow starter and needs a bit of a runway. But he was just flat out outrunning dudes, and I was stunned by that 40 time. That said, I really like him as kind of a. But I'll call back to one of my favorite guys last year in Khalil Herbert. Okay. A guy that could get drafted onto a team in day 3 of the draft, be the third running back, somehow get an opportunity, and people could say, oh, this guy can play. Like Khalil Herbert all of a sudden had 3 games where he had 100 rushing yards, and everyone's like, oh, I didn't know this guy existed. Oh, you mean he led the NCAA in rushing yards at Virginia Tech? Okay, that starts to make a little bit more sense. But I like McCormick. I like him as a, maybe a late third round rookie draft pick. Just a guy to have on your roster, throw in your taxi squad to see if he gets a shot and shows out a little bit and maybe gets himself a backup role.
All right. Jorge, I have a question for you.
Go for it.
In the interest of time, I'm only going to do one deep cut. Do you want the projected UDFA from a really bad football program? Or do you want the SEC back projected in the 6th round who isn't getting a lot of play from folks?
Well, when you sell it like that, it's kind of hard for me to I know we're kind of up at the wall for time. I'd actually be cool with listening to both of you. Wouldn't mind doing because I know the first one, we talk about the program that hasn't been really relevant since Shano was there. We're talking about your own University of New Jersey, Rutgers University, Isaiah Pacheco. Can you talk a little bit more about him?
So, my alma mater. Rutgers football program, not very good. And he's a guy who shot up people's boards because of the combine. Sub 4.40 at 216 pounds. And when you do that, almost no matter what school you come from, you're going to open up some eyes. And so when I see folks looking into him more, they're talking about good contact balance, good pass pro, could be a change of pace back in a committee, something like that. And he may be a UDFA, but he's going to be in somebody's camp somewhere. And, he's a post rookie draft stash, but someone who I think, as long as we're doing deep cuts, I think is a deep cut of mine. And briefly, the other deep cut I have is a projected 6th round back. That's Jerrion Ealy out of Ole Miss. I'm looking at him, and I think the huge knock on him, or the most significant knock, is size, right? 5'8", 189. Most of the other stuff I see, though, very good receiver, even played out wide sometimes. We were talking about that, as a possibility for Beatty. Has long speed, produced pretty well in the SEC. I don't know that we're talking enough about Jerrion Ealy, and I'm sure there's people watching, listening, and maybe even on the frames right now who think I'm crazy.
I think it makes sense. Sorry, go ahead, Jorge.
No, I was just going to go back to what we were talking about earlier with Beatty and the whole pass blocking thing. We go back to pressures and pressures allowed. According to PFF, he's only allowed 3 pressures. And he is in 2021 and 2020 had 1 pressure. 2019 1 pressure allowed. So this guy can actually protect the quarterback to a certain degree. So I'm actually pretty. That excites me more for potential on-field availability than other metrics, if you get what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Ealy. Over 4 yards after contact per attempt, and missed tackle once every 3 rushes. So that's impressive. The word of warning, though, on Pacheco dead last in missed tackles forced per attempt in this class.
That's how we do in Rutgers. That's how we do.
He spells Isaiah really weird. I'm out.
Okay. All right,
that's my analysis.
Just about time to land the plane here. My takeaway from the running backs this year is after the big 3, and maybe some people don't have the big 3 as the 3, but for me, a lot of other folks, they are. After them, I'm not really looking at running back for a while. I think there's, quarterbacks that you take a chance on that they could be a starter in a super flex. Very talented wide receivers. I might not go back to running back until late 2nd.
Yeah. So
I think that makes sense.
I think I don't want to say I necessarily differ there. Actually, I do, because you said late 2nd.
Okay.
So I think there's a lot of running backs in this class that aren't going to be number 1 guys. Just going down the list. You can look at James Cook. You can look at Tyler Beatty. You can look at even maybe Isaiah Spiller. You can look at Jerome Ford.
Yeah.
Just there are a ton of names on this list that just aren't going to be the dude on their teams, but they can contribute. They can be a guy that can run the ball well. They can be a Ronald Jones. They can be a guy that can catch the ball well. They can be a James White, things like that. They're never going to be in contention to finish the season as a top 12 running back. But some of these guys, if they find the right fit in the right role on the right team, I think they could push for something like maybe running back 24 and just be a good flex option week to week.
Okay. All right, so that just about does it. I had fun with this episode. I think what I really liked about today's episode and what we'll see in the next few weeks is, we're looking at a balance here between numbers and scouting, watching tape and that sort of thing. And so we're bringing it all to you, the whole picture here with Dynasty 365. And so it's time for plugs. Joe, where can they find you on the Twitter? What are you working on as far as content? Where can people find you?
You can find me at Joe E. Matz. That's Joe with extra E, M-A-T-Z on Twitter. I think I got to hop in on and write a prospect take here because it seems like everybody else is, so I can't get left out here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you've been busy with your move, but we're looking forward to the fire from Joe. Now, let's see, Tyler, where can people find you and what you got cooking?
They can find me at FF Tyler Heil. That is Heil on Twitter. I signed up for a lot of rookie prospect profiles. I'm pretty excited about some of these guys. I didn't sign up for a lot of running backs, but after the amount of film I've watched in the last 96 hours, I feel like I need to write 2 or 3 of these guys up just because I have so many notes on them. But I'm going to start really diving into these wide receivers here over the next couple weeks and write up some of these top guys and some of these guys that could be top guys like Christian Watson. So, yeah, I'm going to write a lot of profiles here in the next few weeks leading up to the draft. I'm pretty excited about it.
Right on. And folks can find all those prospect profiles at fantasyandframes.com. I am FFJunkie_ on the Twitters. I'll be pushing out some Dynasty Target articles soon. Folks that we want to target in the offseason going into next season as Dynasty buys. There's all sorts of great stuff on Fantasy and Frames with Dynasty, Rookie. That's kind of, a lot of what we're doing now, but, all year round, we got you covered. Jorge, you want to highlight anything else going on in the Frames empire?
Sure. So Nate, Markham, and myself, as well as Hollywood Titan, are going to be starting our IDP podcast a week before the NFL draft called Shoot the Gap. So we're going to be looking at a little bit more in depth into our IDP prospects in the NFL draft. And then tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern is our weekly episode of Fourth and Frames, where we're going to have Heath Cummings from CBS Fantasy join us to talk a little bit of free agency fallout and talk about some Dynasty startup action.
All right. Okay. The big guns.
It's going to be fun.
Okay. And remember, you can follow all the podcast action from Fantasy and Frames at FIF Pod Network. What a great show. What a fun time. That's a wrap. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thanks, Joe. Thanks, Jorge.
See you guys.
Hey, guys.
Hey.